Hello everyone, so welcome back to this channel. So in this video, we are going to show you how to solve unseen scenario questions in your paper 2 exam. Just to provide you with some context, prior to the syllabus change, candidates are not required to solve this kind of problems. Instead, they will receive a pre-release materials for them to study. Whereas for all of you here, you are required to solve an unseen scenario question, which is usually at the last question of your paper 2 exam, and they are worth 15 marks. So I've received numerous requests on whether I can do this kind of video. So in this video, I'm going to show you step-by-step process of how you can solve an unseen scenario question. Okay, on my screen here, these are the three methods that I lay out that can help you solve programming question. So upon getting a question, the first thing that you need to do before you ever start to code is to understand what are the program requirements. What does the program needs to do? And upon getting the program requirement, you need to break down the program requirement into further smaller requirements. This is so that when you're solving the problem, you don't feel too overwhelming, and they can really help you to solve the question step by step. And the third step is to solve each problem. So without further ado, I'm going to show you the first question that we'll be doing, which is not so the difficulty of an IGCSE exam, but this question will prepare you for the next question that we'll be doing, which is which I got it from the Cambridge specimen paper. So let's try to solve question number 1. Again, as I said, the first step is to understand the program requirement. So let's see what we need to code. So we need to implement, here they said, a vending machine to sell Milo to the students and teachers. And you will need to write a code that fulfill the following requirements. So I would say that this question is an easier question because I've broken down the requirements for you. So if you have not coded before, I would strongly encourage you to watch my previous videos on chapter 7 and 8. Whereas if you have already watched, I would like you to pause the video and try to see if you can solve this particular problem. You can write it down on a piece of paper. So, and then we'll discuss the solution. Okay, now I assume that you have tried out the question. So let's proceed. Let's solve the question one by one. So your task is to initialize the following variable, Milo stock count, assign a value to it. So before you start coding it, here I have a pseudocode syntax cheat sheet for all of you. If you're interested in getting it, you can download it. Follow the link in the description below. Whereas they show us how to do different things like declaring a variable, comparison, array, conditionals, and also the various types of iterations and their syntaxes. So our question here requires us to declare a variable. Using the cheat sheet, we know that this is how we declare a variable here. So I'm going to follow the same step. Milo stock count. Okay, let me write it in a better way. Milo stock count. And they said assign a value of 20 to it. So to assign a value to a variable, we use an arrow, 20. And this variable will be used to store the stock of Milo. And another variable that we need to create is called revenue earned. Again, writing down the name, solve it step by step, assign a value 0 to it. And last but not least, item so record is an array. So looking at our pseudocode cheat sheet, so this is how you declare an array. So I'm going to write the keyword declare and followed by the name of the array, item so record, followed by double dot array. So here there's a catch here is that they didn't say create a fixed size array, whereas they said you need to create a dynamic array. This means that the array has a dynamic size. So what I would do here is that I would use 1 double quote and followed by a close bracket to signify that this is a dynamic array. Last but not least, we need to give the data type that of this array. So because they are storing integer, so I need to write the keyword integer here. So here's the three stuff that we need to initialize. And let's proceed to the program itself. So the program states that the user will first be prompted to enter the quantity, number of Milo that he needs to buy. So to receive an input from a user, we know that we can always use the input keyword followed by the variable that will be storing the input value. So I'll write input. Since this is the quantity of Milo, I would recommend all of you here to use a name, a variable name that you can understand, such as in our case here is Milo quantity. The reason why I emphasize on the name itself is because naming itself is part of the criteria that can help you earn better marks. And it's also a good programming practice. So now we got the Milo quantity that the user wants, and the next requirement, if the quantity entered is more than the current stock available, which means if I want to purchase what is more than what is being stored, the program will output the message to let the user know that there's not enough stock. Else, the program will calculate the total price of the transaction and the price will be output. So let's solve the question one by one here. Hopefully now you see the keyword here, which is if, and also the keyword else. And this shows us that we need to use a conditional for our question. So this is how we do a conditional statement, just in case you forgot. You use an if keyword, then, and the following code here will be the code that will be executed if the condition is true, and else this statement here will be run if the condition is false, followed by an if. So I will write the same thing here. If, what is our condition? The quantity is more than the stock count. So I will write if Milo's quantity, which is what the variable we created just now, is more than the stock count. How do we know the stock count? We can refer to the variable that we have created. So this Milo stock count. Milo stock count. And if this condition is true, we need to, according to the program requirement, we need to let the user know that there is not enough stock by outputting a message. So I'm going to use an output statement, output, to write something like there is not enough stock. There is not enough stock. And what if the condition is not true? What if the user doesn't input a quantity that is more than the stock value? Here, I will put an else statement. And according to the program requirement, we need to calculate the total price and output the price. And the information given here is that Milo, the cost of Milo is 2 ringgit and 50 cents. So first, I need to calculate the total price. This is when you need to create a variable. Let's say I will create total price variable and put an arrow will be equal to the Milo quantity, how many Milo you want to purchase, multiply by the price of each Milo, which is 2.3550, a float. And upon getting the total price, we'll output it. Again, use the output keyword. I'm going to use another color, total price. So we are basically done when we write the if statement here. So the next program requirement is that for recording purposes, the quantity of Milo purchased in each transaction should be recorded into an array, which is the array that we have created, items still record. For instance, if 2 Milo is bought, then the integer 2 should be added into the array. The revenue should also be updated. So just in case some of you might not know what an array looks like, it looks like this. So an array is basically a variable that can store many different values. So let's say this is an array here that has 6 items. And what the program requires us to do, again, understanding it is important, is that upon the user entering the quantity of Milo he or she wanted to purchase, let's say the user wanted to purchase 3 Milo, we need to record the value 3 into our array here. And for another transaction, let's say another user wants to buy 10 Milo, we need to write down 10 in the second element in the array. So this is why what it means here by saying we need to record the amount, the quantity of Milo purchased. But how do we do that, right? So this is when counter comes into play. So for the first transaction, the Milo quantity needs to be stored in the first position in the array. And for the second transaction, they need to be stored in the second transaction. So we need the counter to store which transaction is this, like number how many. So on the top of my program here, I'll create an additional variable called counter equal to, I'll start out with 1. Okay, so upon, say I have an empty array here and I need to store the quantity of Milo into the first array. Remember, this is how we do it. We will write down the array name, item so record, followed by a square bracket. And this is called indexing. When we index something, this means that we are accessing part of the array here. So let's say I'm accessing the first position of the array. I will need the value 1, in which this is the value of the counter variable. So I'll write item so record counter is equal to the Milo quantity, which is the amount the user has entered. All right. And the next step is really important. For the next transaction, you will not want the Milo quantity to be stored here. You will need them to be stored in the second position. This is why, in our case here, you will need to increment your counter variable. So counter will now be equal to the existing counter value plus 1. And for the next transaction, the Milo quantity will be stored in the second position instead in our array. So this is what they mean here. And they said the revenue should also be updated. And this is relatively simple. The revenue that we use to store the amount is revenue earned. So what I will be doing is that I'll write revenue earned. I'll update this value earned is equal to revenue earned plus my total price. And this is how we update the revenue. And the last requirement is that this program will run repeatedly until the user enters the value stop, which means, try to picture this in your vending machine. Upon you purchase, let's say 3 Milo, the program will need to ask you again to ask if you want to purchase any more Milo here. So what you need to do here is that for now, we need to use a while loop. And this is how it works. I'll be using the color blue to showcase how can you repeat, all right? I'm moving everything here. How can you repeat this segment of code, all right, sorry, this segment of code for many times? So first of all, I'm gonna create a continue variable at the top. I'll let it to be true. I'll assign it to the value of true. And upon adding this code, I will add a while statement and iteration. So while continue is not equal to stop, because if continue is equal to stop, then I will have to end my program. It's not equal to stop. I will do the code here. So this is the code that will be run over and over again if the value of the continue variable is not equal to stop. So at the end of this program, we'll add an input continue statement. All right, before that, we need to write an output to ask the user. Output, do you want to continue coding? Do you want to continue buying Milo? Do you want to continue buying? And we'll ask the user to enter his or her value into the continue variable. And here we have it. I'll put an and if and while statement here. So what this code means here is that, so first of all, I'll ask the user, how many Milo do you want to buy? And if the Milo entered, quantity of it is more than what we have, we'll output there's not enough stock. Otherwise, we'll calculate and output the total price. Or store the Milo quantity into our item sold record, and also update our revenue earned with the transaction price here. And last, we'll ask if they want to continue. And if the user enters stop here, and when this code statement went back here, my continue will be equal to stop. And stop not equal to stop, this condition will not be true. And this is when the program will move to the end while statement. And here we have it, the whole code, all the codes for our question here. So this is a relatively easier question as compared to what is being shown on the specimen paper. But I understand that it could be difficult to understand and emphasize. So if you need to watch it for multiple times, you may do so. Or you might need to refer to my pseudocode masterclass video to understand the fundamentals of each pseudocode construct. All right. So here I have it. The answer for this solution. Again, if you wish to download the PDF version of the answer, you can also download in the description below. So now we'll proceed to a harder question. So this is a question given by Cambridge to all the exam candidates for this latest syllabus. It's one question that is in your specimen paper, and it involved the usage of two-dimensional array. So again, I encourage you to try it out yourself. You might need an hour or two to solve it, but solving it before watching my video will definitely help you understand better what I am explaining. Okay, so now I assume you have solved the question yourself, and let's proceed to the question. Again, the first step is to understand what are the program requirements. So let's read the question. So the question here states, I have two arrays. A student name array is a one-dimensional array, and a 2D array called student mark. So the position of each student data in two arrays is the same. So this is what I will be explaining later. And we also have the class size variable and also the subject number variable, which store the number of subjects a user take. So the program requirements here is described here. Okay. You need to write a program that calculate the combined total mark for each student. That's the first thing. And the average mark, and also output all this information about a student. But let us first understand what are all the arrays here, right? So first of all, student name array here, I have drawn out an illustration here, which is not given in the question, to help you understand that student name is an array, again, a variable that has multiple value that stores a student name. So I have a few examples, Jane, Jenny, and Jensen. Whereas the student mark array, they are a two-dimensional arrays that stores the mark of a candidate. So it could look like something like that. Whereas the marks of the first row belongs to, let's say, Jane, Jenny, and also Jensen. So these are the marks for different subjects, and this one could be biology, chemistry, and also physics. And this is what they mean here by saying this 2D array, and then the position of each student data in the two arrays is the same, which means student in position 10 in the student name and student mark is the same, which is what I have done here, which means Jane is our first element, first name in the student name array. Therefore, in the student mark, the first array here, all the marks here belongs to Jane. So by having this visualization in place, it will help you to decide how to solve your question. And again, they give us two variables, class size, which is the number of students in the class here. So in our case, it will be 3. And subject number will be the number of subjects in our syllabus, in our question here, which is also 3. Again, your code should be able to work for array size of different name and also different marks. So even if the class has 40 students, your code should still work for them. In other words, you don't need to write any of these codes in your exam paper, because these are just a way to help you understand the problem. And this is and by having this drawn out, you should be able to understand the requirement better. The first requirement said you should calculate the total mark for each student. So for instance, Jane here, your program would need to sum up her biology, chemistry, and also physics marks. So, and then for Jenny itself, you need to sum all these marks up. And the average mark, again, as implied, is the average mark of these 3 marks, and also the grade awarded. This is special because if we look at this table here, how grade is awarded is based on their average mark. So if the student's average marks is greater than 7, their grade is distinction, so on and so forth. And this, I know that it can be quite overwhelming. So now you can follow me step by step and I'll show you how to solve it. One important thing before we start coding is that all the arrays and variable have already been set up, which is what is explained here. Which means you don't need to create these variables. They have already been set up. And in other words, Cambridge is saying that you need to use these variables in your code. All right, let's try to solve it using pseudocode. First of all, because we need to calculate the total mark, again, I said we solve the easy problem first. The total mark for each student, I'll need to create a loop that will loop through each student name and also their marks. So when it comes to loop, I will use a for loop here. So I'm going to write for, let's say I'll use I as my counter. For I equal to the initial value 1 until, so see, because I am looping through the array for each student name, so the number of times I need to loop through the array depends on the number of students I have. So the number of students here, do not write 3. If you write 3, it won't be correct. Instead, you will need to use the class size variable. All right. With this, your program can work with any class size. So I'm going to write class size. And this will help us to loop through the array later. And we are not done yet, because if you look at it, when I loop through, let's say I'm in the first element of my student mark array, I still need to loop through each mark for each student. This means that I need to have another for loop to access the element here. So I'll be writing another for loop inside the for loop. This is called nested iteration. For j equal to 1 to my here. So the number of marks I need to loop through depends on how many subjects I have. So as my guess, I'll use the subject no counter as my ending value. Subject no. All right. And here, since I have my indices here ready, the reason I need to use this is because of how we access a 2-dimensional array here. Okay. So I'll copy this array to explain how a 2-dimensional array works. Here I have it here. I'm going to copy this. And for each element here, to access a particular element in an array, you need to know the concept of indexing, which is for vertical, it starts from 1 to 3, and horizontal is also start from 1 to 3. So if, let's say, I need to access the first element of my array, and my array is called, name is called student mark. This is my student mark array. And if I need to access the first element, I will need to do student mark square bracket 1, which is the horizontal indices, followed by in another square bracket 1. So this statement here is equivalent to 100. All right. So if, let's say, I were to change this value into 3, then this statement here will be the equivalent of this value here. And this is how we access a particular element in a two-dimensional array. And this is why we create a nested iteration loop here, so that our I and j can be stored here. And they can increase after every iteration. So let me try to do this for all of you. And since we are calculating the sum of the student mark, before I ever add up anything, I need to create a total variable. I'm create total equal to 0. And for each iteration, this is what I will do. I will add up the student mark, add up the total with student mark. As you might have already guessed, I will do I, capital I, and j. And the I and j value here is the loop variable that I am referring to. All right. So let me go through one time for you. So initially I will be equal to 1. J will also be equal to 1. So what I will be doing first is will be total plus student mark 1, which is the value of 100 here. And the next element I will add will need to be student mark 1, 2. And this is when this iteration comes in. And I will add a next counter, next j here, which means I'm incrementing the value of j in my code so that it will become 2 in the next iteration. And it will end at subject node, which is the value 3 here. So by the end of each inner iteration, I would have added up all the student mark for this particular student. Okay, so let me rub all this value off. And so this is what we have calculated, the combined student mark. And to get the average mark, all we need to do is to use average is equal to total divided by the number of subject that the student have taken. So here we have it. We have our total mark of the student, and also the average mark of the student. And after that, after we get the average mark, we'll need to output for each student. So there are different things that we need to output. So the first thing is the student. I'm gonna write in blue color, output. So according to our example here, I should be outputting the name of Jane. And to access Jane, I'll need to use indexing again. So I'm gonna do student name using my I counter, because my I counter here is how I track which student I am in now. So I'm going to output student name, square bracket I, and followed by the total. I'm going to output total. And I'm also going to output average, followed by what else? The grade awarded. So this is when things comes tricky. For now, I'll use a pink color pen. So how we decide which grade to output is based on the average mark. So this is when we need to use an if statement here to decide which grade should we output. So I'm going to do an if statement, if average is greater than or equal to 70. If this condition is met, then I'm gonna output the grade distinction. Output distinction. And else, so if our code here, if our average is less than 70, it could still be one of these grades here, either merit, pass, or fail. So we need another if statement inside this if statement. So we need a nested if statement to check whether if this average, is it greater than, yeah, we know that it's less than 70, but is it greater than 55? If that's the case, we'll need to write, hey, output, the student got a pass grade. All right. Okay, so now the student got a pass grade here. And even if, so followed by an else statement. So now we know that average mark, and if the code reaches here, it is less than 55. But even if it's less than 55, it could still either be pass or fail. So I need another if statement here, which is if average. So I'm going to squeeze my word greater than 40. My result will be output. Oh no, I think I made a mistake here. Here should be merit. And output pass. And I made another mistake. Instead of writing output straight away, I should put it then. Then output pass. Else our output fail. All right. So here I have my code here. I need to rearrange it to make sure that it is tidy. Okay. And once you've written so many if statements, do not forget to also write some of all the and if statement that for each if statement, and if. And there's another and if here. And do note that your if statement need to align with your and if. All right, here we have it. All the codes here. We have output everything depending on the student average mark. All right. So here we have achieved from format 1, 2, and 3. But we haven't solved requirement 4 yet, which is to store the number of distinction, merit, pass, and fail for the whole class. Which means for the students here, I need to calculate how many of them get pass, how many of them get distinction. So this is when our codes need to be a little longer. So I'm going to copy the entire code here to a new page to help you visualize. So I'll give you some time. And because we need to calculate how many distinction, merit, pass, and fail the class has. So before the program even runs, we need to create a field variable to store the number of count. So I'm going to create a field variable like distinction count equal to 0, merit count equal to 0. All right, should be using an arrow here, and pass count arrow 0, fail count arrow 0. All right, I'm going to write it at the top. So, and depending on the student average mark, I will need to update my distinction and merit count. And I just realized I ran out of space. So I need to, again, move a little bit to the bottom. So here I'll write, after outputting the word distinction, I'll update my distinction count by 1. Distinction count plus 1. And I can do the same thing for merit. So merit count is equal to merit count plus 1, followed by the pass and fail pass count equal to pass count plus 1, and fail count. All right, I'm gonna do fail count equal fail count +1. And I believe these are the codes that you need to write for this question. So just to double check, our code, they do calculate the combined total mark. They also calculate the average mark. And also after we calculate all the marks, we'll output the name, combined, average, and grade awarded. Eventually, we'll store the number of distinction, merit, passes, and fail. So of course, in this question, do read that they need us to add comments to explain how your codes work. So when you're doing it, so what you can do is that we usually use a sigma, this symbol here, to signify our comments, because for now, let me rearrange this so that all of you can download it for your reference sake. So I'm going to put this statement on the right hand side and the other statement in the left hand side. So as you can see, when you're solving this question, sometimes you do need many corrections when you are solving it. So my comment could be something like this: variable that stores count of distinction, which is comments are basically words that you write to help explain what the code does. Merit, pass, count. And you can also add another comment here for your for loop. For instance, sum up student mark, the student's mark, using loop. And the third one could be check the grade, check which grade student is receiving. All right, so here I have it, all the codes here plus comment in order to solve my question here. So I have been talking for 20 minutes, and it's normal if for now you still feel very overwhelming. You might need to watch this video a few times to fully understand the programming construct of this question. So feel free to rewrite the whole program out and check your understanding by watching this video back. And I will include all the codes that I have written here in the Google Drive link which is in the video description. So please download it. And last tips here before I close this video is that for this question, do reserve 30 minutes for it. 30 minutes to solve it. Because for your paper to exam, the exam duration is 1 hour and 45 minutes. So try to finish up the first 12 to 13 questions in 1 hour and 15 minutes and keep 30 minutes for this question, because it will be an unseen scenario question, which means you won't be doing any question like this in your workbook before. So having more time will help you to first understand the problem and then slowly coding out your solution plus your comments here. All right, so if you have any question, you can leave it in comment section, and I'll try my best to answer and help you. So that's the end of this video. I will see you soon. Thank you.